Well, hello everyone and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, we're going to be fixing a Commodore 64. And not just one Commodore 64 or two or three, but 12. Now we may not get to all 12 on this video. We'll get to a few. If there's interesting fixes, I'll show them. If they're kind of boring or simple fixes, I may just breeze over the actual repair. But otherwise, if it's interesting, then I'll be showing it. I'd like to thank local viewer Steven, who had these 1264s in his house and he didn't know what to do with them, and I said, well, give them to me and I'll repair them. Now, truth be told, I wasn't sure if I should make videos about these repairs because I've done Commodore 64 repairs quite a bit. So I asked my patrons if they thought I should make a repair video, and they said absolutely. Overwhelmingly, I had tons and tons of responses with them saying that they wanted to see these machines get fixed. So, without further ado, let's start looking at these machines. Now, before we get started with this repair, of course, the very first thing you should always do when you're repairing a machine is double check that you have a working power supply and working video output. I have the C64 on the bench and it's outputting the video, as you can see, and if I turn up the speakers, there's the music as well. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. More than once, I've had an issue with the display device and I end up trying to test a machine and chasing my tail when there's actually not a problem. As far as what I'll be using to do these repairs, of course, I'll be using the virtual bench oscilloscope here, which I'll be doing a video capture so you can see what I'm working on, along with a camera that points down so you can see me working on the board. I have my home built power supply. I'll be using the multimeter most likely, which is, oh, here it is right here on the bench. And generally with a scope and a multimeter, you can effect pretty good repairs. For machines that have chips that are soldered down, of course, you need to be able to remove those chips. So a desoldering iron like the Hakko 301 I use is very helpful. But I have shown on other videos ways to get things out of the boards, like by using solder suckers, like a solder pult, which is sitting over there, solder braid, things like that. There are ways to get chips out without causing damage. But for easiest and quickest repairs, for me, I'm going to be using the Hakko because I have that and it's a pretty great tool. All right, so let's turn off the C64, which incidentally, if you haven't seen before, is in a VIC-20 case now. I had an extra case, so I transferred it into this just because I love the way it looks here in this VIC-20 case, and I had an extra one, so why not? Now, this is the first 64 we'll be working on, and I did troubleshoot all these machines. Well, not troubleshoot, I tested these machines already, and this one just turns on and says out of memory. So there's definitely some kind of a RAM problem or something going on with this. So let's get it on the bench and check it out. All right, machine number one is in pretty good physical condition. Let's crack this open and take a look at what's going on inside. Look at that, there are little bumps here. Someone has installed screws that are too long into the case. So I'm gonna wager this thing has been accessed before. Whenever you open up any old computer, you're doing a little bit of archaeology to see if someone has been inside the machine before and what kind of work has been done, which can help guide you towards potential problems because someone might not have done the work properly in the past and that might have actually caused the issue. Case in point, remember that motherboard I worked on, the 64 motherboard, that was all burned as if someone had used a blowtorch on it. Oh, it's a very stuck together case here. Ooh, I don't like the cracking noise, but you gotta open it. There we go. Inside here we have the RF shield, the cardboard variety, which is kind of crap. All right, time to remove this motherboard. See what's going on here. What kind of work has been done? All right, so RF shield on the bottom has already been removed. They left this cardboard in here. But yes, definitely had an RF shield on the bottom. That is gone. Now, what's kind of amazing is if someone's done work, they hid their work or they covered their tracks because I don't see any signs of any possible rework on the bottom of this board. Not one bit. Correction actually. Looks like the RF modulator was swapped. Take a look right here. See all this mess? And weirdly enough, there's actually a missing pin. It looks like someone has scratched one of the traces as well. That's weird. Whoever did the work, though, replaced it with an original, correct RF modulator for this machine. All right, let's take a look at the top side. So we have a socketed SID chip. Everything else is soldered to the board. The VIC-2 chip in here will be socketed as well. I've never seen a 64 that didn't have a socketed VIC-2, but I have seen them where every single other chip was soldered, which is kind of rude. So it's nice enough that this SID is in its own socket. All right, so let's power this thing up. I'll show you the error that it is getting. Now, as you can see, the machine powers up and it's running basic, but right away it says out of memory in 0. Well, there's no program actually running, but when you first turn on a 64 or VIC-20 or a PET for that matter, they check to see how much RAM is available. Now in the 64, it really only ever has 64K, but remember, before the 64, VIC-20s and PETs could have different amounts of memory in them. So what BASIC or the kernel does when you first turn on the machine is it checks to see how much is available. That way BASIC can report it properly. That memory check is still there in the Commodore 64, which is why when you turn it on, it actually has a black screen for a little while it's checking for memory. There are obviously enough problems with this RAM that it fails the memory check, and I guess there's not even enough for BASIC to run. Now check this out, I'm focusing on the memory. We have two different types of memory on this board. We have 2 empty RAM chips here and 2 empty RAM chips there. These two and these two are NEC. If you watch my repair videos before, machines with empty RAM, well 64K machines with empty RAM, suspect bad memory chips. Empty RAM's not always bad, but it's very, very often bad. Now I am doing a field test just to see if any of the RAM on here feels warmer than it should be. And I'd say that it all feels about the same temperature. Maybe this chip here is a little hotter than it should be. I'm just gonna grab a marker here and I'm just gonna draw a little mark on it here because we're gonna do another test with probably the dead test cartridge right now, or no, we'll try something else. I have a couple ROMs to test and we'll see if it's this chip. For troubleshooting 64s, it's very helpful to have one of these double-ended ROM cartridges or one that has selectable ROMs. This has both the dead test ROM on it. Dead test is good for testing 64s when they actually give you a black screen. It can sometimes be helpful, and the other test here is just the normal diagnostic ROM, which is a bit more comprehensive. Neither of these are perfect, but it's a good start. I'll go on the record right now and say that memory errors like what we're getting now can be caused by a bad PLA as well, and this particular motherboard type is very likely to be a bad PLA as well, which is this chip. So we're going to start with the regular diagnostic, not the dead test, because this machine is mostly working, obviously. And let's see what this gives us. Okay, it is running the RAM check, and look, right away it's telling us that U9 and U11 are bad. Now notice where this diagnostic froze up. The 0 page tested okay, which means that all 8 chips have a working 0 page. That's the first 256 bytes of memory. A 6502 processor requires that 0 page to pretty much do anything. It's possible to write special software that doesn't use the 0 page, but ultimately it's pretty non-functional without it. So that's why the very first thing that's tested is the 0 page, and then the next thing that's tested is the stack page, which is the next most critical thing after the 0 page. And it froze up on that test, and there's a little flashing parentheses under the V key. That's where the RAM test stopped, and it did identify that it thinks U9 and U11 are bad. Now on this board, U9 is this one and U11 is that one. These are both NEC chips. Should we trust that RAM test that it's really those chips that are bad? I'm not sure. As I said, the PLA could be the problem as well. Why don't we swap this cartridge around to the dead test side and see if this corroborates at least that those two chips are bad. Okay, so right away it's flashing. That's the way that the dead test works. It flashes the screen to tell you which chips are bad. Now we need to count the flashes. So we're getting 5 flashes. Now the thing about the dead test cartridge is it will only flash the first chip it detects as bad. So if you have multiple bad chips, it's not going to flash both. It just flashes one. To figure out what 5 flashes means, we need to go to the dead test manual. Here's the dead test manual, and 5 flashes is right there, U10. Now, the later 64s have 2 RAM chips versus 8, like on this one. So that's why there's like this Rev B and Rev E, because that's the 2-chip version. But we need to look for these AB, which is this earlier one, But in this case, it says 5 flashes is U10. But that presents us with a little bit of a problem because U10 is this chip right here, this MT RAM chip. And let me switch back to the other diagnostic, and it says that U11 and U9 is bad. So we're getting conflicting results from 2 different RAM checks for this machine. Problem is, when the stack's not working, then you're gonna get inconsistent results, especially with this diagnostic probably, because I wouldn't be surprised if this diagnostic is trying to run subroutines and stuff like that. They're just not gonna work well when the stack is malfunctioning. So which one are we gonna trust? Well, I'm gonna go with the dead test because it's the MT RAM chip that's on here, and those chips, as I mentioned, are notorious for being bad. So let me remove U10. I'm going to be using the Hakko desoldering iron, and I have a top tip for anyone who has one of these, or really any desoldering iron. Hakko sells what is a drill bit, a hand drill bit, that is perfect size to clean out your tip. I highly, highly recommend you get one of these because it can be really difficult to clean out these old tips. But with the drill bit, it makes incredibly quick work of any crust that's built up in there. So this thing has saved me from having to replace this tip. I ended up buying this drill bit along with the replacement tip because I thought this tip was toast, and it's not. It works perfectly now that I have that drill bit to clean it out. All right, the MT chip is out. Now, I just noticed something about this board. Besides having MT RAM chips, it also has some MOS74LS logic. This one and this one, and they are notorious for being bad. What I had heard is that Commodore was running out of 74LS logic chips when they were making the Commodore 64. So they spun up some of their own 74LS logic chips, which are those MOS chips, and they are of extremely low quality and seem to fail a lot, especially now that time has passed. So with this machine, it could actually easily be these bad logic chips that were causing this random changing memory error, not to mention the PLA as well. And unfortunately, that's one of the problems with these types of boards. There's just a lot of chips that can possibly be bad to cause overlapping errors like this. It's one of the reasons why these like 1983-84 ranged breadbins are, in my opinion, the most unreliable 64s. By the short boards, like the 64C, Commodore had pretty much worked it all out, and they were making very reliable chips. And then the early 64s as well, like the 1982 versions, are very reliable as well. They use a PLA that's made by Signetics, not MOS, and then they didn't substitute a bunch of junky logic chips like this. So you're not going to have those failures to contend with. I don't think they were using MT RAM either on those early ones. So generally those machines just work. All right, so obviously one way to check to see if this RAM were bad is just put a socket in the board and put another chip in there. But I'm gonna test this chip in the Retro Chip Tester Pro because people complain when I don't do this. So let's just see what this does. Okay, right away it failed. So I have found that the Retro Chip Tester Pro is not a perfect device for testing things. It can give you a general idea if it's good or not, but I've had it where this thing says stuff is good, where it's actually bad. But I think for RAM tests, generally it's pretty accurate. It's saying here at address 342, when it expects to see a 0 bit in the RAM chip, it's actually getting a 1 bit instead. Now, so we test this again. It should be consistent and fail at the exact same spot. Okay, for sure this RAM chip is bad. I mean, 99% sure that the Chip Tester Pro is accurate and this MT RAM chip is bad. So I'm gonna install another socket. I wouldn't be surprised if we're gonna have to put more sockets in this board because there are other chips that are bad as well. Okay, socket it's in. I put a new RAM chip in. Let's turn this on. We are getting a seemingly working machine. Let's run the diagnostics on here, make sure the memory checks actually pass. I also hooked up Sven Petersen's test harness onto this machine just to make sure all the peripheral ports are working properly. Now the diagnostic has gotten further than it did before. It's saying that the RAM is good. It's doing a couple of the more thorough RAM tests at this point. Now, I know other YouTubers like Jan Beta talk about future-proofing machines. To future-proof this particular machine, there's some things that would need to be done to it. All the MT RAM should probably be removed, or the new owner needs to be able to desolder RAM chips when they fail, because I can pretty much assure you those other empty RAM chips are gonna die. The SID test is running right now, and this part of it sounds fine. We'll do a more thorough test in a second. Now notice before this resets, it says control port bad. I've had problems with just a bad user port connection that could be causing that error. So I don't believe that there's actually a control port fault, which would be a joystick port. Anyways, I was saying the other empty RAM chips are going to be faulty or will be faulty. Then the MOS 74 LS Logic chips, those got to go as well. So these should be either socketed, and then in the future, if those die, then they could be swapped out, or just swap them out now. And then the PLA, I mean, people are going to argue, but the PLA is probably going to die as well. But, you know, maybe that'll last another 20 years too. Who knows, actually. But the fact that it's not in a socket means that it's extra hard to swap out for someone who's not good at desoldering. So those would be the things that I would do to future-proof this particular machine. But because I'm just quickly repairing the machines for this video, I'm not going to do that right now. All right, so the diagnostics look like they're working. We all know what's left to do. That's something that probably hasn't happened on the channel in a little while, so we're gonna do it right now. Let's just remove this harness. I'm popping in the Easy Flash cartridge, because we know what's on there. I'm grabbing a controller here, because it did tell me that those were bad, and I'm not gonna hook a keyboard up, and you can navigate the Easy Flash with the controller. I don't remember which port you gotta be in, though. Ah, that one right there. Adrian's tools, and here we go, 8-bit dance party. If I turn the music up, that would help. Okay, so in reality, there does appear to be a problem with the SID chip, I'm gonna say. Let me run that again. Let's listen carefully. Do you hear that weird, like, poppy sound? So this part of the song is totally fine, but that intro, which of course I know really, really well, is not fine. So this SID chip is actually marginal, unfortunately. Now you might be able to play plenty of games and have it sound absolutely perfect, but demos and games that push the chip to the limit are probably gonna exhibit some kind of sound problems. I'll run the full-on SID diagnostic. I have a feeling it's gonna sound fine in there, but sometimes it just takes that special combination of whatever that particular tune is doing to the chip to really make those weird sounds appear. Oh, I'm gonna have to plug a keyboard in to use this as well. Oh, I got the keyboard for the machine sitting right here, so we can just see if that even works. All right, here we go, run all tests. Oh, I don't hear the sound. Okay, I've exited out of the SID test, and all the tests sounded fine except for the low pass one. It sounded a bit different or strange. And that maybe is why it's sounding weird like that in that music, but I'm not really sure. Unfortunately, with the SID chip, sometimes you just have to run tunes through it to hear if there are problems or not. And if it's not tunes that you're very familiar with, like I am with that Donkey Kong intro song, you might not even have noticed that particular problem. And like I said, there might be a ton of games that sound absolutely perfect, but it's the right combination of filters or whatever that particular SID file is doing that causes that issue. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark this SID maybe with a question mark here, and I'm just gonna write on the final note that it's sort of a marginal SID chip. So there we have it. Number one machine was the out of memory, and all that was wrong was bad U10, this empty RAM chip here, and a marginal SID chip. Now the reason why I'm even showing this repair, and I didn't just edit this out because it's just yet another bad RAM chip, is that one of the diagnostics, the one that actually I ran first, said that two other RAM chips were bad, and it was the dead test that gave me the accurate information that it was U10 that was bad. So just be careful with the RAM tests on the 64, because you can get conflicting results, and sometimes you just have to kind of pick which one you think is going to be the right one. In my case, I picked the dead test as the right one, and it was the correct choice this time, just because MT RAM chips are more likely to be wrong than NEC. But if they were all NEC chips, I guess I would have been guessing. And in this case, the dead test was better, but I can tell you for sure that dead test is not very good at that initial RAM check. And plenty of times I've had to tell me the wrong chip is bad, or the PLA was bad, or some other chip was bad, and it was telling me the RAM chips were bad. It was completely off base with what the problem was. So beware of what you're running diagnostics-wise on the 64, but in this case, this machine is fixed. Alrighty, there we have it. One repaired Commodore 64. Only 11 more to go. Now don't worry, I'm not going to be unleashing 12 repair videos all in a row. That's probably too much for even the most die-hard Commodore 64 fan. I'll intersperse them in the middle of other videos I release. And actually, it's good because it gives me a little bit of a buffer. Sometimes I am so behind on my videos due to working full-time that it can be a little bit of a struggle to have a video ready every week for the main channel. And of course, I'm putting out videos every week on the second channel too. So 2 videos a week, it's quite a lot of work. So not that these 64 repairs are easy, but I can sit down and work on it all at once and kind of get it done in whatever, a few hours, versus one of the bigger videos, which can take me tens and tens of hours, 20, 30 hours of working on it to try to get it done. So I guess we can call these 64 videos filler, but I think people enjoy them, so I'm not going to look at it that way. So anyhow, there we go. If you like this video, thumbs up. But if you didn't, you know what to do. Huge thanks to my patrons. Their names are scrolling up the side of the screen. If you want to become a patron, you can do so at the link below. I have various tiers of patronage, and the first or lowest tier just gives you early access to videos, but all the higher tiers get extra content. Like I post little pictures and videos and questions about like repairing these machines. I pose that to my higher tiers. So yep, if you want to kind of be a part of the behind the scenes of Adrian's Digital Basement, that is one way to do it. So I guess that's going to be that. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I will see you next time. Bye.